Hello, Gobs, and welcome back to another episode. I'm bringing you guys today another Gob Rants. You'll have to forgive me if I sound a bit breathy. It's a bit hot in the cave today, so if you hear a lot of breaths and whatnot, that's why. Definitely not because I'm just a fat lard. Well, that was probably some of your guys' first introduction to me. If you don't know who I am the Goblin King. If you couldn't tell, I do tabletop RPG stuff, okay? I read horror stories and the likes. I give my opinion on things. But I also do video game RPG stuff. I love role-playing games. They are my passion. For those of you wondering what Gob Rants is, it's my series where I give my hot takes, or they're not really hot takes, but I just talk about things and usually RPGs that peeve me off. But I'm also going to expand it in the future eventually, because I can't talk about RPGs forever. Oh no, I probably could. There's a lot of RPGs, both tabletop and video games. There's just so many. But that's what this series is. I give my hot takes. You guys respond in the comments, okay? I'm always open to learning from different viewpoints. That's the whole point of this series. It's not to make you angry or to rile you up. I'm not beating down just because you play something differently from me. I want to invoke discussion. I want to see other people's viewpoints based on games that they've played, based on groups that they played in, just based on their life experiences and what shaped their viewpoints. I want you guys to give your opinions about the subject. Whether you're for it, whether you're against it, whether you do something differently, agree, disagree. It's just to invoke discussion. I want to see where people come from. I want to learn more about different viewpoints. Like my last Gob Rants was why I hate rolling for stats. And in that video, I don't know for whatever reason, but it did really well, and I got a lot of comments. There were some people who agreed with me. There were some people who disagreed with me, which isn't a negative thing. Just because you disagree with me doesn't mean it's anything bad. It just means you had a different opinion, and I can respect other people's opinions. I'm not going to hate on you for having something different than me. We shouldn't hate each other or feud over things, just over opinions. So regardless, there was a lot of people who commented it. I kind of see things differently now. You know, just a bit different. It didn't change my overall opinion, and I may do a follow-up video responding to those comments. Not as a hateful thing. It's never going to be a hateful thing. I'm not going to hate down on anything. If anything, it's just going to be on the idea, but not the person. Never the person. So if you are going to comment and if you are going to have discussions, don't go at each other's throat. And this intro is going on a bit too long, but it is opinionated, so if you agree with me today, type it in the comments. If you don't agree, tell me why in the comments. And with today's subject, I implore you to watch the entire video before you make your comments. I think I went on a bit too long of a spiel. I may have cut some things out. So if some things seem scrambled, it's because I'm going off script today. I didn't write any notes. I'm doing this all off the top of my head. So it might be a bit rambly, and you might not even see it. No, you probably will. But today's Gob's Rant is on: should natural 20s in D&D be automatic successes? AKA, should crit successes be automatic passes on any check? Let's get into it. My first section, well, I am breaking down exactly what a critical success is. Now, if you guys have played D&D, this is aimed specifically at 5th edition and D&D 1. I don't think any other previous editions had automatic critical successes built into the rules, but I think there was a lot of communities and groups that just automatically had that rule already. I think that was in D&D way before 5th edition or D&D 1. But I am discussing about 5th edition. Now, looking at Raw, there isn't actually any rule for natural 20s being automatic successes, except for attacks. Nowhere else in the book does it ever say that a skill check on a nat 20 is an automatic pass. It is only for attacks. And on those attacks, if you roll a nat 20 on a dice, so you roll your dice and you get a 20 on a dice. You don't add your modifiers or anything. You just plain old Jane 20 on the dice. That's why it's called a nat 20. A natural 20. I don't think I have to explain that, but just in case someone is new to D&D or whatever, there you go. But looking at the raw of 5e, whenever you make an attack and you roll a nat 20, you automatically hit regardless of AC or attack modifiers, so that's already a big bonus. And you roll twice the amount of dice you normally would have rolled. So if you're swinging with a greatsword, which is 2d6 plus modifiers, you roll 4d6 plus modifiers. Now sometimes these critical successes can be a bit underwhelming, because if you're using like like a great axe and you score a critical success, well, you have a chance to do 2 plus mods or 24 plus mods. So there's a really big high and also really big lows. So at the end of the day, crit successes naturally, just raw, in 5e can be underwhelming, but they can also be really powerful. However, through the years, either through communities, just plain old Jane talking, medias, and the worst of all, D&D memes, which I'll go over those one day. I'm not talking about like TikTok or whatever, like videos. I'm talking about like I keep seeing modern day captions of D&D memes that feels like it's being pushed out by some corporate company wanting to capitalize on D&D players, I suppose. I should make an entire video on that, actually. I think I will. Every time I see them, I'll collect every single image and save it to a folder, and then one day go over that. So subscribe. You get to see that video in the future. But regardless, over the years, the natural 20 has become synonymous with automatically succeeding any check in D&D whatsoever. Any check you get a nat 20, you automatically succeed. And that's kind of been a baseline for most groups, even though it's not raw. It's like probably the most biggest well-known rule that a lot of people use that isn't actually a rule. Now the point of this is, where do I stand? Because you have 2 groups. You have the group that says nat 20s don't automatically succeed checks, and then you have the group that says nat 20s, well, automatically succeed checks. Where do I stand? Well, with everything, you change your views throughout the years, and so have I. So, starting out, I was on the side that's saying nat 20s did not automatically succeed. I was on the side that says if you roll 20, add your modifiers. Even if they're minus, even if they're pluses. You gotta add them because nat 20s do not automatically succeed checks. Or so I thought. Then I started playing Baldur's Gate. Then my decision changed really fast because I lean more towards the side now that nat 20s automatically succeed any skill check that you do. Why? Because I think it's more fun storytelling. In Baldur's Gate 3, you do a lot of skill checks. You'll also run into a lot of situations where your character, unless you switch to another character, on a first or second playthrough, you're not going to know where every skill check is. So you're primarily going to use your character. And guess what? Your character, unless you play a bard or something, isn't going to have a plus in every single stat. And there's a lot of skill checks that you make, but your character doesn't have any type of bonus at all besides, like guidance or advantage or something along those matters. And for those moments, you really kind of want to succeed just to see, well, people like passing checks. You really want to see what happens if you succeed on a check, because a failure, depending on what you're doing, can be devastating in Baldur's Gate 3. And then I was like, that's really fun. Being able to pass on a nat 20, succeed any skill check is really fun, and furthermore, is really fun storytelling. Now, let's look at a couple examples, because since I've changed my idea, I want to kind of give an example on each one. Let's say you have a barbarian with 18 strength, plus 4, and then like a plus 2 in athletics, or something along those lines. We're just going to say strength check to break down a door. The DC for this really tough door is a 20. Barbarian rolls, they get a 12, plus 4 to strength, no additional modifiers or anything. That's a 16 on the check. Now, let's say you have a rogue. 8 strength, minus 1 in your modifier. They go up to that door, they roll their dice, DC 20. In Raw, or how some people play the game, they're never going to ever be able to break down that door because their strength is a minus 1. They roll 20, that's a 19. DC was 20, they fail. There's no possible way for them to ever break down the door without outside help. But at baseline, that rogue, like I said, without any additional help, isn't going to break down that door. Now, if you look at the other method, your barbarian, well, they still get a 16, but then your rogue goes up to that same door that the barbarian couldn't break down. They roll in that 20, and suddenly, that rogue breaks down the door. And now you have to kind of explain in the story how it happened. Now, one method is like saying they're just naturally lucky. So maybe they went up to the door and they saw a weak point somewhere and they like punch a hole through the door in a weak spot that the barbarian missed, and they managed to slip their hand around and unlock it. You could do something like that. Or you could like combine the 2 rolls. So maybe the barbarian's kick that failed loosened the hinges on the door. The rogue goes up and kicks it down because the hinges were loose, and due to, I guess you could say, teamwork, they were both able to kick down the door. So you could always do that. Of course, you can always assist with each other to get advantage for the barbarian, but that's just an example of looking at how a nat 20 can change the story around. So previously, on the first roll, neither of them are able to kick down the door, and now you have to find some other method to get through. I mean, I guess you could have your rogue lockpick it, but what if the door is being held by a bard that you can't lockpick? See, and now the story can also develop in now that those players have to find another way to get around this door, which can also be fun storytelling. It makes the characters seem just a bit more powerful than they actually are, and again, it doesn't have to mean that they pass based on their stat, they just pass based on pure luck. So you can use either way. That's just looking at the two arguments and comparing them to each other. So most groups pick one path. They either go nat 20s or automatic successes, or nat 20s don't automatically succeed skill checks. And it just changes per group. That's the whole thing. You know, I might like it, but another group doesn't. Either way, if your group comes together and you all decide upon one decision and everybody has fun, then it doesn't really matter if nat 20s succeed or nat 20s don't automatically succeed. It doesn't matter as long as your group has fun with it. Some people like the more down-to-earth style where nat 20s don't automatically succeed. And some people just like the more powerful, luck-based storytelling, I guess, that just creates less down-to-earth stories and a bit more wacky because, you know, this little puny rogue just kicking down this gigantic door that the barbarian couldn't. Pretty funny. And, of course, there's tons of other situations where that could happen. Now, that's my stance on this entire thing. If I probably need to go it again, but I used to say nat 20s will automatically succeed, but now if I do play 5e or run it, I'm going to say they do automatically succeed, just because I think it's more fun, and I think you create more wacky stories that are more fun to tell because they got a nat 20. And in most circumstances, if you have any additional help or any pluses, a nat 20, even if you don't run the automatically succeed check, should pass most checks. I mean, what kind of check are you doing where you need to pass a DC 25 to 30? Unless it's like late game. But in early games, like all the way from 1 through 12th level, should fairly be DC 20s and under. So if you have any plus to the check, they should all be passable if you get a nat 20, regardless of your modifiers. And, you know, unless it's negative or you have nothing. But most of the time, you should be able to pass almost any check on a nat 20, regardless of automatic success. But now, let's look at the sigma around it and why it probably shows up. The first one being, well, now the players can just do whatever they want because they score a nat 20 on the dice? No. Common example is like, well, they can just go up to a king and ask for the land, and the king has to give it to them because they rolled a nat 20 on the dice. No, because you're the DM. Or I'm assuming you're the DM. I see this mostly from a lot of DMs, and it could also be players, but they are the DM. You can, if you're playing with this rule that says nat 20s automatically succeed, then don't have them roll for impossible stuff, such as convincing a king to give some random stranger all of their land. Just don't let them roll for it. To say, no, the king can't be persuaded whatsoever to give up their land. We're not going into that to like, well, what if I have someone hostage or something? We're not looking at that. We're looking to someone walking up to the king and attempting to persuade them to give over their land. Look, the king's not going to do it regardless of what you roll. Your skill check isn't going to apply it. Same thing like, oh, can I jump 30 feet into the air on a roof? If I get a nat 20, I automatically succeed. No, you can climb it. It can be a hard climb, and then the nat 20 lets you climb up the wall, but you're not just going to be able to jump into the air because you get nat 20s. Look, you're the DM. You say what rolls go or not. Now, it can be unfun to say no, but sometimes you gotta say no, especially if you're playing with this rule that says nat 20s automatically succeed. You determine if the check is possible. Now, this isn't so to say to shut down everything that your players do. Always provide them some option around it if it's possible. Like, obviously, they can't jump 30 feet into the air. I mean, there's spells and stuff for that. It's hard to say don't say no. It's more like if it's possible, try to find another reason around it. I think you guys get the idea. Almost every check should be possible to a degree. Like, obviously, you can't say, oh, jump to the moon. Not possible without magic. So, I'm just saying you are in control of what checks can be made and what can't be made. Now, if you have some particularly dice happy players that like to roll before you even give your say on it, well, that's just a player thing. Just tell them not to roll before you've given your decision if it's possible or what they should roll, because then they'll roll and like, oh, 20, it doesn't matter what stat or anything you use, I got a 20 on a roll. Nah, make them re-roll it. Give your final say before any dice are rolled. But that's another issue for another day. So for those who are kind of against it, remember, or you can make the checks. If you think it's impossible for them to do a task, then don't have them roll for it. Because if they do attempt a task and get a nat 20, you're like, well, I guess it automatically succeeds, then that's a feel bad on you because, well, now they get to do this impossible thing and you're kind of weren't for it anyways. Or vice versa, you just say, no, it didn't pass. And then if that's the case, then why have them roll in the first place? If you're playing with this rule, why even have them roll? Like, oh, the DC's 30, you can't win on an automatic check. Again, if it's an impossible check, why even have them roll in the first place? You're not bound to the rules of the dice. Okay, guys? Just because a player says, oh, I want to do impossible thing. Oh, I rolled a nat 20 before the DM says anything. You don't have to abide by it. Also, on the same note, don't use this to shut down players who want to do something different that you didn't think of. Like, I can't give any examples. I ran out of examples in my head. But, don't use it to shut down your players either. Don't be like, oh, no, that's impossible. Okay? There's just kind of always a way to do things. At the end of the day, come together as a group and agree upon a ruling and just have fun. Just have fun. That's what you're here for. You take time out of your day, just have fun. And if natural 20s automatically passing is fun to you and your group, then have at thee. If your group prefers more nat 20s don't automatically succeed, then have at thee. Either way, as long as everyone's enjoying themselves and having fun, then it doesn't really matter. And that's all I have to say on critical successes. But you might be wondering, we're probably halfway through the video, or there's still a lot of time left. Because I want to rope in another subject. Since we're talking about critical successes, there is a variation in the group of people who agree that natural 20s should be critical successes. Of course, there's a bunch of different little variations in there. Here are the two big ones. There's one side that says nat 20s automatically equal critical successes and nothing else. You just roll nat 20, you pass the check, and no other rules are presented. Then there's the other side. Well, if natural 20s are critical successes, then natural 1s should be critical fails. Oh boy, what a fun rule. Now I get it. Some people like critical fumbles. Some people just enjoy it. Me personally, I don't enjoy it. Boom, you get 2 takes this episode. I'm going to make this fairly quick, but there are some people out there who are like, well, if nat 20's critical succeeds, then that one should critically fumble. And then they have a fumble table, or they come up with something on the spot that disadvantages the player furthermore because they rolled a nat 1. Look, just because there's an opposite doesn't mean you need an opposite reaction. Nat 20 is fun. It's just a fun thing. And sometimes critical fumbles can also be fun as well, depending on said critical fumble. Now this is where it starts to divulge because there's different play groups do everything differently. But from what I've seen, most of the time, critical fumbles are extremely punishing to players. Let's look at combat. If you're playing off raw, because not only do critical fumbles apply to nat 20s automatically passing, but even if some people play by raw, where nat 20s don't automatically pass, some people so implement critical fumbles on attack rolls because of critical successes. Because critical fumbles are not in the book. You just roll 1, you just assumed you're automatically failing. Now, let me get into a side note before I actually break that down. I want to talk about Pathfinder for a little bit. Pathfinder actually does have critical successes and critical fumbles built into the system. But of course, it's an entirely different system. If you score 20 on the dice in Pathfinder, that automatically counts as a success. If your modifiers plus the dice would pass the check, you get 2 successes, which makes it a critical success. And the same thing if you get a 1. If you get a 1, you automatically fail by a degree. Add up your modifiers. If you fail the check, then you critically failed the thing. Now this can change because you can roll 1. Let's say you have plus 11, the DC is 12, 1 plus 11. You pass the DC, you fail, but you don't critically fail. And the same for vice versa. Let's say you're trying to smack an opponent with 28 AC or whatever, and you only have a plus 6 to hit because you're a wizard or something. So you score a nat 20, add the 6, you still don't meet the AC, but the nat 20 made you succeed by 1 degree, and you still get an attack. You just don't get a critical attack. Now, this is fun for some people. This is not fun for some people. I just wanted to go over how Pathfinder did it. Pathfinder doesn't have advantage, which is, I forgot to mention this, but my original point is kind of why I didn't like nat 20s automatically succeeding was because advantage is kinda super easy to get at 5e, and rolling double dice on everything, well, you're gonna see a lot nat 20s, which means you're gonna succeed a lot more checks. But now I'm like, I played Baldur's Gate, I'm like, I don't really care. You succeed, you succeed, you fail, you fail. No critical fumbles or anything, and that's why I hate critical fumbles. I don't care about critical successes because you just pass, and you don't usually ever get anything. In skill checks, you just automatically pass, and in attacks, you just get the double damage, which can either be super underwhelming or it can be really powerful, and that's about it. It's not like critical successes are like super advantageous for the players. Oh, I hate seeing my players succeed. I want them to have a hard time and fail. It's collaborative storytelling, guys. This just comes from player versus DM. What am I getting at here? I'm talking about critical fumbles. That's what I was originally talking about. Now, from seeing a lot of D&D horror stories and among other RPG stuff and homebrews and stuff, certain people like critical fumble tables, and I just don't know why. Oh, you failed this check. Well, roll on the critical fumble. Oh, you lost your arm. Oh, that sucks. Maybe you shouldn't have rolled a nat 1. And like what? If you rolled 20, oh, you automatically pass. And that's it. Cool. So you fail, you lose an arm. You pass the check, the story gets to move on. Awesome. It just feels like critical fumbles usually overly punish your players. Now, I did do a variation of critical fumbles, but the worst I did was I took a player's shield away and they had to use a bonus action to pick it up. That was the worst critical fumble I ever did, and even that felt bad to me because it feels like it just takes away from the player. It just really beats down the player. And what's the point in critical fumbles? Because you, the DM, essentially have infinite resources to pull from. So critical fumbles don't affect you. Critical successes can, because if you're running a combat and you critically succeed against a player and do a lot of damage, well then that just puts more tension on the story. Whereas if that thing critically fumbles, that doesn't really affect you because you can just make another enemy shows up that doesn't have that debuff on them. The players, they just can't make another player show up. Or they can't just make another friendly character show up that doesn't have that critical fumble debuff on them. So it just feels like it's just punishing your players, which some groups like that. Some groups like critically fumbled tables. But sometimes, some DMs like to spring up critical fumbles on the players without telling them. And that's where the problem comes. If everyone comes together and agrees, hey, let's do critical fumbles, then whatever. But if you don't tell anybody about it, and then you're like, oh, you got a 1, critical fumble time, that's just douchebaggy. Just tell them what it's about. And since this is usually used as opposed to critical succeeds on attacks, you'll find these tables also have a critical fumble, or sometimes they also use when a player rolls a natural 1 on attacking. And this is even more punishing because it just hurts your marshals. Now let's look at how many things a spellcaster. Well, spellcasters can cast up to 1 to 2 spells, which the second spell is like a bonus action spell, which doesn't usually ever involve rolling a dice. But most of the time, spellcasters have 2 types of damaging spells. They have one where they have to make an attack roll, and then they have the other where the enemy has to make a save. Now what does this mean? What's the point? Well, say you have critical fumbles, and you have a martial character, a fighter, that got to level 5, and now they have multi-attack. In their turn, they can make anywhere from 2, and then if they use action surge, up to 4, and then if they're dual wielding, up to 5 attacks in 1 turn. On average, they're going to make 3 attacks in a turn, and then sometimes they'll make 5 attacks if they have action surge ready. That is 5 times the amount of dice a spellcaster is rolling. That means they have 5 times as more likely to see nat 20s, but they also see critical fumbles. And sometimes, well, most of the time, if not all, the critical fumbles are devastating, such as hitting another player. Cool. Damaging your allies. That's fun. Losing their weapon. Cool. Now the rest of their attacks suck because they rolled a nat 1 on their first attack and lost or broke their sword. Damaging themselves or putting themselves into a vulnerable position. Cool. They make their attack and they fall prone, or sometimes the enemy gets a free attack on them. Every critical fumble table is differently, but when your marshal is rolling up to 3 dice, at least at minimum 2, even at 2 dice, that's more dice than a spellcaster will ever roll, because Firebolt, that's the spell for the turn. Fireball, they don't even have to roll. Burning Hands, they don't have to roll. Ice Knife, they have to roll for that. But you start to get the idea. The spellcasters can just opt for spells that require enemies to make saves rather than critical fumbles. So now your spellcasters can almost always avoid critical fumbles. And then if they go like Divination Wizard or something, or they take the Lucky Feat, well, then they're just never going to see critical fumbles. Whereas a Marshal who has to make attack rolls, who has to roll the dice to even do stuff in combat, well, it just punishes them even more significantly. And some groups are okay with that. Me personally, I wouldn't be. My playgroup tried to do some critical fumbles at time, and I'm like, wow, this isn't fun. Because on the nat 1, you're already missing your attack regardless of modifiers. So essentially, as a fighter, you just wasted your turn. Whereas a spellcaster who's using spell saves instead of spell attacks, even if the enemy succeeds, they're still taking somewhat of a damage. It's almost like spellcasters never have this sort of range to fail. I mean, they can fail, and sometimes some groups might even implement, oh, you have to do a magic check on your checks. Oh, you fireballed your team, haha. Look, at the end of the day, do whatever's fun for your group. I'm against critical fumbles. I'm for nat 20s automatically succeeding checks. Don't do impossible checks. Do what's fun for your group. That's about all I have to say. So, if you guys agreed, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. If you guys like that nat 20s automatically succeed, hate that nat 20s automatically succeed, enjoy nat 20s not automatically succeeding, if you have different critical success rules or critical damage rules, because we kind of do a crunchier. We do like, if you score critical success, you roll max damage on one dice, and then you get to roll your dice, then you add your modifiers. We do that rule, which is pretty fun to me because it always feels like your critical successes do something, but then the enemies can also critically succeed and they can do more damage back to you. So it's like a double-edged sword. So like in turn you do more damage, but so do the enemies. So that could be really fun. It makes combats go just a bit faster, which is great for D&D. But if you have different rules for calculating critical damage, let me know in the comments. If you enjoy critical fumbles, tell me why. Try to open my eyes. Like, maybe you guys run soft critical fumbles like mine in a certain way where the character just lost AC temporarily. They just had to spend a bonus action to pick up the shield. I'd consider that a soft critical fumble. I would never want them to lose their weapon because they have to spend an entire action depending on your rules, your custom rules. They have to spend their entire turn switching to another weapon that they'll potentially just lose again on another critical fumble. Yeah, that's fun, doing nothing in your turn. But some people might have a different opinion, and for those people, like I keep saying, tell me in the comments below. But if you're interested in more of these Gob Rants, well, liking the video helps, commenting lets me know that you enjoyed this, but thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, subscribe to see more in the future. I also do other stuff. Check out all my other stuff, okay? My Final Fantasy series, pretty poppin'. And I have social media in the description, and that is it for my outros. I hope you gobs have a lop of a day, and may your adventures be free of awful homebrew rules. Also, let me know your homebrew rules in the comments so I can make a video on that. That would be pretty fun. Or go to the Reddit. Okay, type it on the Reddit. Okay, I'm out of here. Goodbye.